1, 2, 3, 4. One-legged Roger and his one-legged mother lived in a house in downtown Atlanta.
And being able to bring all your craft and all your belief to something that you're doing for the 50th or the 100th time, it's called being a professional.
Well,
hello, young man.
Oh, hello. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good. My wife still loves me. My kids are healthy. I got a job still, so, you know, it could be worse.
Love flourishes.
It does.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this. I've wanted to talk to you for some time about your success story. It's unique.
Unique to the minor leagues. Yeah, that's true.
You consider it to be minor league?
Well, it's hard. The market for what it is that we're doing is so much larger than what we're serving, and we are constrained by our physical presence on Peachtree Street in downtown Atlanta. And I've been trying for 12 years to get my hands on the property just to the north of us, which would make all the difference. It makes so much sense on so many levels, but it's just the inertia of dealing with a huge organization like Emory University and being a part of a civic structure that has not prioritized the arts or arts and culture as it might have. It's just been very frustrating for a very long time.
When did you find the auto shop one?
Where we are now?
Yeah.
Well, we found that in 1990, and I was the catalyst, actually. It was owned by a restaurateur, Steve Nygren, who's a fabulous human being, but he wanted to turn that whole neighborhood into something special, and he wanted a theater company. And we were not established, and we had very little going for us. He was trying to lure the theatrical outfit into that space. And so what I did was I went in just kind of talking my game as best I could. And I talked the theatrical outfit into taking a master lease on that building, which for them was a safety backup because they weren't paying any rent. And then I sublet the theater premises from them. And we had a very long and involved lease process where, you know, if they were forced to come share the space with us, that we would have at least 3 to 6 months, you know, together before we would be evicted. But I positioned ourselves as the catalyst to get in there. And sure enough, I talked everybody into the deal. And the landlord put in $50,000, and the Woodruff Foundations put in $150,000. So they had a $200,000 renovation budget in 1990, and I got in. And fortunately, the landlord was willing to accept whatever I could pay. I mean, for 3, maybe 5 years, I was just paying a little bit more than I did the month before, because it was almost that long before I was paying the rent that I had agreed to. But we got our toehold in there, and after 10 years, we did another capital campaign, or we did our first real capital campaign, and we bought the building from Steve Nygren. And then that's what gave us the Shakespeare Tavern as we know it today. That opened in 2000, just right before the 9/11 attacks. And we've been doing business there ever since.
2000 is when you became the sole proprietor of the place, or that you actually bought?
Yeah, that's when we the terms of our sublease, or the lease, were such that Steve had the right to sell the entire building to anybody who wanted to, without regard to the rights of those tenants. Because we had scratched out this little toehold in downtown, the guy who was running the Woodruff Foundation at the time kind of took a shine to us and was impressed by our tenacity and the work ethic. And after 10 years, the last 4 or 5 of which we were jam-packed pretty much all the time doing what we were doing, performing every week of the year, he engineered a capital campaign that allowed us to buy the property. And then also we raised the roof, and we put in a balcony in the theater, and we put in the full service kitchen, and we had nice bathrooms. And that's got us started in 2000. And that was kind of off and running. Those first 10 years were really sketchy. A lot of, brush with bankruptcy, never had enough money, barely getting by, eking it out, at the end of every year, owing the union a ton of money, having to figure out how to get that paid off before they'd let me do another show, that kind of thing. It was pretty rough. I think I only had 3, 4, maybe full-time employees at that point for most of that decade. So when I look back on my career, I do think the first, when I'm talking to people who are just starting out, or they've got a budget of, $130,000, and they say, well, we can't afford to do this, we can't afford to do that. I know whereof they speak. I know what it's like, but an organization with almost no resources. The first 10 years was that. After we got opened with the larger footprint, everything eased up quite a bit, and we became, I guess, what you'd call an emerging mid-sized arts organization. And then a decade of growth from 2000 to 2010 grew pretty darn well. And then Apprentice Company got started there in 2002. You were in the first Apprentice Company, was that right?
I was, yeah. So I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking about the other actors in the group that we had already arrived to an established theater company.
Well, barely established,
right?
But yes, what happened there that was really, really key was right after 2000, 2001, I think it was. That's 2000. Yes, 2000. Into that. The Charles Lorden's Foundation, they had this idea they wanted to support the arts, so they asked 5 organizations what we'd do with $250,000. And their intention was they were going to pick a winner and give them $250,000 over a course of 2 or 3 years and see what happened. But all 5 of us submitted these wish lists that they found so compelling that they went to another foundation, partnered with them, and they gave us all $250,000. Over 3 years. And part and parcel of that was it allowed us to start training at Shakespeare Company. In 1985, the second year I was in operation, I had an actor come work for me who had studied with Tina Packer in the Berkshires. And she just could not stop talking about what she had learned up there. And I started cutting out the ad they had in American Theater Magazine, and I put it up on my bulletin board, a month-long intensive. You get to spend all this voice training and dance training, movement training, all this good stuff. And I thought, oh man, I really want to do that. I want to do that. And I looked at that thing for 10 years, and every year I would take it down. I put another one up from American Theater Magazine, thinking, I got to get around to doing this. It's all about the Shakespeare. When we got the money to dream a little bit, one of the things we put in there was professional development and training. And at that time, Laura Cole had come back from the Berkshires because she had found them on her own and paid for it and gone and done that. And she was talking just like my friend had 10 years prior. And so I went on and I went up there. And of course, you studied with Kevin Coleman. You've been up there with those guys. I mean, it's just like these are my peeps. I mean, there's so much we have in common spiritually and artistically. And it was like coming home to a place that I had known. But of course, I hadn't met any of those people. But I immediately turned around and we allocated money from the Lorden's Theater Initiative. And we sent 9 people up to the Berkshires and did the training. And as they were coming back, we decided we'd do our own Apprentice Company training program. And it was the best thing we ever did. Because it forced us to decide who we aspired to be, to formulate and articulate our values to people younger than ourselves, and to be an example of what it was we were trying to create. And you got in at the very beginning of that. And then as we continued down the road, what happened was I was creating generations of these actors that were trained specifically to do the work as our mission encapsulated that work, or actually specifically the way I wanted to be doing the Shakespeare. And it became very clear that these were the people I wanted to hire because they were the ones who were doing the best job. At about that time, I'd hire other professional actors who had degrees from better schools than I went to, and they'd come in and they would argue with me about aesthetics and well, we shouldn't be talking to the audience, or why are you doing that, or why are you doing this? But when we worked with the apprentices, they saw what we were doing on stage, and they just wanted to prove they could do it. So they didn't argue with me. They jumped in line and just drove us forward. And it was an extraordinary period of artistic growth there from 2002 all the way up through the back half of that decade. And so much of that came from the Apprentice Company, which was informed by the work of Shakespeare and Company. And of course, we've returned to them many times. And I've had Dennis, late Dennis Crosnick, he passed this last summer, but had him come down several times. And Michael Toomey with the clown workshops, and Kevin Coleman teaching us, and we sent some people up there, and we've had this close relationship ever since. And of course, Tina, she's the one who got me going to these conferences and stuff, and got me to make speeches, and eventually, we're having a greater effect in our field, I guess, by following her example. I always view our production schedule as a marathon that never stops, followed by another marathon right after each other. And that 1 week between Christmas and New Year's is kind of important to us, just to give people 5, 6, 7 days to breathe. My volunteer coordinator came in and said, Jeff, I know you don't want to hear this, but that week people are still in town. We could sell tickets if you programmed it. And I just thought, no. For the most part, we close on a Sunday and we preview the following Thursday, and have done so for about 24 years, which is a level of productivity most theaters can't get their head around. What they haven't discovered is what I discovered, which actually shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, which is it's about rhythm, and a stitch in time saves 9, and 9 is a big number. It is. In fact, actually, it's the number of shows in addition to the 4 or 5 that a company our size might be expected to do. Because we've done as many as 16 shows in a single year, but we tend to settle on about 12 to 14.
When I was full-time at the Tavern in January, we would do Lion in Winter, or we did Man for All Seasons.
Oh, yeah.
We did a non-Shakespeare, and we had smaller audiences, which at the time in my experience, they were very small. Prior to me going to Chicago, which would have been our smallest audience, would have been one of my bigger audiences with the storefronts in Chicago. And then when I came back to the Tavern in January, we had a sold out run almost of 12th Night. Is it just the Shakespeare? Is that what does it? Or is it that?
Well, yes. It's a bit difficult. For the longest time, a good 30% of our work was non-Shakespeare, and I fought for that, and I did that, and I would say we do world classics. We're doing so much programming that, we can do 4, 5, 6 Shakespeares, and I can do 3 or 4 other plays. But, in my experience, there's simply nothing that performs in the marketplace like the Big 10 Shakespeare titles. Now, we are the Atlanta Shakespeare Company at the Shakespeare Tavern Playhouse. And everything about it is there to contextualize the Shakespeare. So when you do Shakespeare, that's the heart of the mission, and it's going right down the middle. And that's going to sell better than almost anything, no matter what else you try to do. We've done a couple of 3 musicals and done them extremely well. One of them got nominated for 8 Suzy Awards. And then,
was that Forum?
No, that was Cabaret, I think.
Cabaret.
Yeah. The Forum was before we had the Suzys.
And that was Matt Nietzsche was in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, Matt Nietzsche, man, that guy, I tell you, he's a gift.
He's unbelievable. Matt was he was talented when I was there. This is back in the day, but he played Brutus when we did a production of Caesar, and he was so young.
Oh yeah.
So I knew he was talented then, but just coming back and to see someone like Matt, who works at the Tavern full time, who has a relationship with the building, with the work, that's when I'm humbled, because I go, there's no one who does it better than someone like this. Like this, he is a player that, I believe the world should know.
I'm with you. And again, my frustration is so difficult to break out of that small room. And part of it is I kind of feel my whole generation was bamboozled to accepting smaller playhouses because, as a performer performing for a sold out house of 200, 250 feels very similar to 300, 350 or 400. But if you go back 50 or 60 years, no impresario who had a lick of business sense would have built anything less than 600 seats. Business sense would have. My greatest frustration, again, getting back to the doing plays that are not by Shakespeare, is that with just a single performing space, every play I do has got to carry the load of my company.
Gotcha.
Whereas if I had multiple spaces, then I could have a show that is carrying the overhead, and then I could have another show that only had to pay for itself. So I think that we could be a world-class, phenomenal engine of culture if I could just get, I need multiple theaters, and I need one theater that can really drive some business in terms of earned income. And, I call it the sustainability piece. I've designed it. I actually had a grant. We spent $230,000 and designed it. We got it all the way to the construction drawings in 2013. And I've had 2 or 3 close calls where I almost got the pieces to fall together and we almost got it going, but it has not happened yet.
Is that in this time, under these circumstances, is that still a dream moving forward?
Absolutely. When I first sought the money to design it, it was 2008, going into that huge recession. And my whole thinking was, well, the world's going to come back eventually. Now's the time to lay the plan. I am biding my time. We've done studies. I've done feasibility studies. I've done real estate studies. Emory University has bought the rest of the property on our block. They told us that they wanted to move the Shakespeare Tavern. And I said, well, that's fine. I'd be happy to talk about that. They were surprised when they discovered how expensive a proposition that might be. They said, well, we thought you leased. And I said, well, I do have a lease. I have a 99-year lease. It's prepaid. And they go, oh, well, how much longer do you have on that lease? And I said, 97 years. But, we're not without support in our community, and I'm not without support in the Emory community. And actually, I have a lot of very highly placed people in Emory who would love to see what we are projecting come to fruition. Because, we could also have, the Guizetta School of Business create a nonprofit arts program to do. And you could center one of those on our organization, which is based in the Western Classical Canon. And as long as you would follow through and do what I call the sustainability piece, then I could have the future of our organization guaranteed to be well managed because it'd be part of the Emory multiverse going forward. And then they would also have a place where they can teach people the best practices of nonprofit management. So there's all kinds of ways we could work together if I could just get the tumblers to align, but it's not easy.
I've experienced working in that house when it's magic.
Oh, God, yes.
And there's nothing like it.
You are correct, sir.
To be able to have that sense of communion. And when it's working, there's nothing like it. It's working, there's nothing like it. And when it hasn't worked for me personally, there's always the next one.
Well, that's true no matter what you do. You can't, they can't all be gems. Some chase the approbation of their peers. Others chase the approbation of people who write and put things in print or on whatever it is. They're chasing reviews or whatever. I chase my own judgment. I like to say that, when I'm looking at what it is that we've got, I don't lie to myself. I see what I see. If somebody tells me it's great, I look at it and I try to see what they see. If they tell me that it's awful, I try to see what they see. But at the end of the day, the way I judge it is what I judge it. My father was a very wise man, and he told me, he said, look, if you know what you're doing is right, just put your head down and keep doing it. The world will take care of itself, and it can decide whether it likes it or whether it doesn't or anything. But if you know what you're doing is true, then you follow that truth. And I've never moved away from that. Now, of course, I was blessed that early on, I had a critic in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution just rake us over the coals every time he came to see a show. He thought I was a hack. He thought I was awful, that I shouldn't be allowed to direct. So I didn't know early in my career what it felt like. So says this is the greatest thing in the history of the world. Well, such and such says blah, blah, blah. I had my audience going nuts. I had the jokes working, and I knew they were working because I could hear the audience. There's lots of signs when you're in a room with an audience that will tell you whether what you're doing is landing or not, landing the way it's intended. There's nothing worse than going out in Act 4 and, a 30-year audience has their hand up to their face. On the one hand, yeah, they're still trying. But the fact is, they're having to try in Act 4. That means you missed it. It's not what you want. You want people like this in Act 4. And Act 4 is where the play is. Most of the times when they trash my work, I think they're idiots. So that makes them idiots when they love it. So, they're either idiots or they're not. I'm not in the business of quoting idiots. So
I'm doing this because it feels right, and I'm getting my sense of creative satisfaction outside of what you might think of it. That's such a great, what do you call, skill or attribute to have.
Well, you're not wrong. I will say that, before I started this company, or I didn't start it. It did exist before I got here. I want to give credit where credit is due. Mm-hmm. Lovely woman, Elizabeth Lewis Corley, built the Atlanta Shakespeare Association, and they did 2 or 3 years. And they did some stuff, and they had a nonprofit status, which they had gotten. And she was going to let me direct a play for her, but then when it came time to direct the play, she left town, and I took over the company. But when I took over, I'd been a part of a triumvirate where 3 of us ran a little company in Chicago. I'd been part of a dictatorship where this guy had held sway, was absolute power in New York City. It's a small ensemble. I'd been part of a commune where we all just kind of had to agree before anything happened. And with this one, I thought, well, this will succeed or fail based on what I decide. Whatever else is true, that's what's going to happen here. Mm-hmm. So I started making decisions based on my experience as a street performer and as someone who had some original practice training in Shakespeare at that time, and someone with a drama degree. I'm making decisions based out of my experience, and we got somewhere. I would say that, just some real dumb blind luck out of the gate with the first show that we did in the back room, or it actually wasn't the back room, but at Seven Stages Theater, when all it was this little storefront. Somebody suggested that we do it at Manuel's Tavern as the entertainment for a fundraiser that Manuel was doing. I mean, he was running for a re-election to DeKalb County chairman, and we were the entertainment one night. It's a crazy idea. But, I had a can-do attitude, so I took my sets and we set them up in there, and we got some lights up, and we performed in the back room of Manuel's. And the journalists all right there, so they couldn't believe it was happening. So we got covered by the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CBS News, CNN News, and the National Restaurant Association Trade Journal. A little community theater production with 1 professional actor, and 60 million people heard about it.
Wow.
I thought, this is easy. And and we did a show a year for 5 years at Manuel's. That was the beginning. I couldn't be convinced, seeing the audience reacting the way they were reacting to these 400-year-old jokes, that I wasn't onto something. Eventually, eventually the guy committed suicide, which was really the ultimate dirty trick, because from now on, he will always be my critic. I can always hear his voice. I can always know what he would think, because, that act made him a permanent part of my work.
The outside voice of the criticism of the tavern, you're working, you're speaking the greatest language while people are eating their soup. You're at a dinner theater, these negative, whatever they are, that can be a bummer. Really, it goes back to what you just said. What does it matter? As long as I know it, I know that the work is what I want to do. It's helping me become a better actor. And then I'm also making a bit of a living doing it. Then who cares what they think?
Well, that's true. It is amazing the degree to which
Those are the tavern actors.
Well, there's that. But there was another theater company that, they were experts at creating the impression of something in the minds of people who didn't see the work.
Mm-hmm.
Another example is that, we used to have the Shakespeare Company up the street, the Georgia Shakespeare, which their credo was, we bring classics to the edge. They would like to take a modern approach to things. Nothing wrong with that. But people would say, so what's the difference between the Georgia Shakespeare Festival and you guys? And I would say, actually, I got to where I would say, actually, I only did this to one person, but I tell the story a lot. I said, so have you ever been to the Georgia Shakespeare Festival? And they would say, well, no, I haven't. And I said, and I take it you've never been to the Shakespeare Tavern? And they said, well, no, I haven't. And I said, well, for you, there is no difference. You're trying to get a handle on something that you're not putting any effort into, and you're not even trying. You want to be able to answer the question some way, shape, or form. Theater has evolved in a different way the last 40 to 50 years. Theater is its own little side thing. It's a boutique art form, if you will, at this point. And the last 40 years, it has tried to compete by becoming a visual medium as well. So modern directors have gone back to repackage Shakespeare classics, which are language-based, poetry-based, if you will, verbal simile, verbal metaphor, poetry in real time. And what they do is they have conceptualized these plays to create visual metaphor and visual simile. So we have this visual simile and visual metaphor in counterpoint to and in duologue with Shakespeare's own language. Well, Shakespeare's language is poetry, which by definition is a distillation from reality. It's already complete. So you're going to add this other aspect that is visual and foreign to it. Initial point of beginning and as a default position of you're directing a Shakespeare play, where's it set? It has turned into this kind of travesty, if you will, of visual mishmash poetry versus Shakespeare's poetry. Well, I'm not concerned at all with the visual stuff. Poetry, by definition, is complete. It is everything necessary, nothing not. I'm going to bank on that. And that has made us, I guess, a creator of simple productions of these phenomenal plays. And if you produce them simply, you can do them more economically, more efficiently. And of course, what I'm trying to do is create a working place where people can make a living, buy a house, educate their kids, and pursue this work. Can't do that in 250 seats. I got to have more real estate. And I've got the product and I have the market. So there again, we get back to my frustration.
With the comedies, one might assume that you might judge them by how funny they are. Does it get the laughs? Does it have the payoff? Does it look like it? And does it sound like a comedy? How do you judge your tragedies? How do you know when your tragedy is working?
So how do I know when it's landing?
How do you have
leave the fucking lights up and you look them in the eye and you speak to Shakespeare? If you can't find the truth in that, then I'm sorry, you're in the wrong business. You can tell when they're there. In Act 4, are they all sitting there with their hand up here like this? I don't think so. And when you go out into the lobby and people are leaving, are they looking in you in the eye? Are they thanking you from the bottom of their heart? Or are they reading their playbill as they sneak by you? It's not hard to tell when it lands and when it doesn't. I will say the comedy, it is easier. You can spot when the playwright asks for a joke, and it either pays or it doesn't.
Actors get in their own way with the work.
Yes, that happens.
When you see that, you can help them say, get out of your own way.
Yes, that does happen.
So for
I can log off here and I can go to the other side of the house in hopes of putting something between me and this wood chipper back here.
Let's do it.
You want me to try that?
Yeah, let's try it.
Or maybe I'll just carry this over there. Whee! Shakespeare on the move.
Sound is so much better here. Do you mind if we do the whole thing over again?
The whole thing over again?
Found your light?
Okay there?
Yeah, no, you look very handsome.
All right. So, okay. There we go.
Gorgeous.
All right. Got it. So where did we leave off? You know, just the nitty gritty of being an employer. You know, I vacillate between thinking, here I am, I'm taking the available resources and we're keeping the flame of civilization alive at great personal cost and sacrifice. That's one way of looking at it. The other side of it is I am a heartless exploiter of the working poor, trading on the delusions and faded dreams of people who don't ever have a chance of being movie stars, but think that they do. You know, what am I? Am I an exploiter, or am I, you know, or is it both? I kind of do believe in the multiverse, so actually they're all true. I've been fighting for so long to try to make it a better place to work, and so that people could expect to make a living, and they don't have to. They just don't have to accept that, you know, what they're doing isn't valued, because it is valued. I mean, I know it. I see it in the eyes of people when they come to me in tears and tell me that it is. You know, I had this one lovely couple that came for 10 or 12 years, and then they disappeared, and then he passed away. Then she showed up about 6-8 months after he passed and says, I don't know if you remember me. I go, of course I remember you. You know, I'm so sorry when Paul passed. She goes, I just wanted you to know that there toward the end of his life, we had a choice of going to our mountain cabin one more time or coming to the Shakespeare Tavern. And Paul chose to come to the tavern. And of course, you know, I was greatly touched, and, you know, I was about to cry, but in my mind, I was thinking, were we any good that night? I hope it was worth it. I don't know how I got off on that, but, you know, I'm trying to grow this thing into what it should be, into its best possible incarnation, but it's not easy.
A lot of students that I work with, their goal is to create theater and to have a company. So how do you do that when you start with no?
Okay, so part of it is it's skills. You know, if you're not a carpenter, dude, you're screwed. You got to be able to build things. You have to be able to wire things. You got to, you know, I had to learn a little bit about what it means to be an electrician. I had to learn how to do things without burning a building down, because I didn't have a license. I had to learn how to build things that I could use over and over. I had to learn Excel. I had to learn how to format it. I had to learn accounting. I had to learn business writing. I had to learn fundraising writing. You know, there's a lot of skills that I did not possess when I first started. A lot of things you've got to have. And if all you have is a vision and you don't have the skills, then you are necessarily dependent upon the presence of others who bring those skills to you. Now, you can be an executive director and you can hobnob your way in and take over someone else's company, or you can be employed by someone else's company, or someone can give you a team and somebody can do those things. And that's probably a smarter way to go, buddy. That's what I would do if I had to do it again. Because what I did was I started without a lot of skills, and then I learned on the job as I went. I became an excellent carpenter. I became an Excel guru. I became a consummate fundraising professional. I became I was actually already a really good photographer. But you know, these things that I learned, you know, sadly, early on, I was probably not all that good as an actor. I did get better eventually, and I'm pretty sure my directing, you know, I don't know. You know, I know it's better now, but I was stubborn, and I was willing to do it over and over until I got it right, and I learned these skills. And of course, the downside of that has created a company which is very much like a Jenga tower with all these missing pieces. We do this one thing extremely well. Well, we do it well to a high standard, but when we step out, we need skills that we don't have on our island, and we either have to come up with them from among our group, or we have to bring in the one right person to help us do something. So, you know, that's a difficult give and take, but, you know, I believe in evolution, and, you know, and I believe in learning the skills that you need, and, you know, I've been very grateful. You know, I have come into contact with, you know, some people who had skills on a level that I would never achieve no matter what I did with my life. Costuming is one, you know, music composition is another. You know, I met Bo, he was then Bo Ketchum, but Bo Geisen, I met him the first show I did at Manuel's Tavern. And he said, you know, some really good music would go a long way toward making this a good show. And I said, could you help me with that? And, you know, what we've done with music in the canon would never have occurred. Anna Carroll Butler as a costume designer is just an extraordinary artisan and a designer and a woman of enormous depth and exceptional creativity. And God, she is so efficient and so well organized. To think that she, with the staff of, now she has a couple of people working with her, but for many years it's just her, doing 12, 13 period shows a year, back to back to back to back with no time in between. An incredible achievement. And, if I hadn't found that, it would have been a different aesthetic, and we couldn't do what I've tried to do. Everything I do is an endeavor to get to that promised land of multiple performance venues, so that I can have multiple revenue streams, doing multiple product lines to the 60 million people who come through this city every year. Eventually something's going to happen. I get this from my father. I come from a long line of preachers, lawyers. He was a magician, but he has small business. I don't know. I think maybe he only had a dozen employees at its height, but it put me through college, as it did my brother and some other folks. My sister. But he told me that as long as somebody's making progress, it's almost always better to work with what you got as opposed to fantasize about what you don't. I've been very fortunate with, Nancy Reinhardt, who is the chef for a night caterer. She is so low maintenance. She does not need my emotional support. Never had a food service issue. And all the time I've been there, I have never personally had to make a meat pie. I've never had to wade into that skill set. From my perspective, she's just been extraordinary. When I look at my box office manager, she's just a phenomenal human being.
You're Becky?
Yeah. And again, she's got a happy home life, and, she doesn't bring her problems to my workplace. And, she's just always just doing the best she can for our company. Got a terrific work ethic. I look at some of those folks and I just wish I could give a better job. And actually, that's when it comes to, if you're looking at succession planning, yeah, I'm going to be hard to replace, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is when I'm gone and 3 years later, 2 or 3 of these key individuals that you didn't know were so key have moved on to do something else because they don't like the new man or woman, or they feel like that their time at the tavern has come to an end and they move on. And then suddenly there's not somebody running the entire patron services world like that, who is just that spot on, that dedicated, that smart, and that emotionally healthy. We don't have a lot of turnover. I'm grateful for that. Lord knows it's not because of how much money they're making, but I guess it's because, they are gratified by the work. So
what's the most gratifying for you at this point? Does acting still work for you? Directing?
Oh, well, yeah. Acting works for me. Directing works for me. That if I was going to try to market myself to the greater arts and cultural community, I could be happy as a managing director. And those are the skills that so few people possess. There's lots of people with artistic aspirations. There's lots of people who everybody's a director. I wish I could find somebody who had a real fetish for expert woodwork, because, I want a playhouse, and, the playhouse can change from show to show and from week to week and month to month. And what would be ideal is if we had different door treatments, different windows, different balconies, different railings, different everything, and they were all exquisitely made, and we could just pop them on and take them off. We could also get to the point to where it's a playhouse, but, it could be Harry Potter's playhouse. It could have magic built in. If I had someone who saw the long-term opportunity of how much fun that could be. And I imagine I could find that person, if I could pay him $650 a week. I've always wanted to have a Roman set, where you have, oak pediments and you got, walnut, turned things. And, you could just be a gorgeous thing. And since we do Roman plays and we'll always do Roman plays, it would be worth spending, $5,000 or $12,000 on exotic materials and excellent workmanship to build a Roman treatment for our set. As it is, we have a Roman treatment for our set that I made, $1,200 at a time over 7 years. It looks good and it's a high production value, but, it could be better. A good friend of mine who has another theater, he got caught in an interview somewhere saying, the world doesn't need another production of 12th Night. And, this is something that drives me crazy, which is, he doesn't need to see another one, maybe. Maybe I don't ever need to see another one. But the vast majority of people who live in this country have never seen a great production of 12th Night.
Right.
Everyone should have the right to see a great production of 12th Night once, 2 times, even 3 times in their life. That means somebody's got to be doing this all the time. I do Romeo and Juliet every year because that was the play that got me out of that Dallas suburb. That's the play that fired my soul. The play hasn't changed at all. I can only pay it forward by doing that for as many kids as I possibly can and meaning it every freaking time. And being able to bring all your craft and all your belief to something that you're doing for the 50th or the 100th time, it's called being a professional. And there's honor in that. Yeah. And when I do that play, Romeo and Juliet, for those kids, they're seeing perhaps their first professional production live. Most of them are going to see this thing, and that production will determine for much of their adult lives how they feel about Shakespeare and perhaps live theater in general. Don't tell me you're bored playing that part. Get your ass out here and give me the best work of your life. Okay, it's second guard and, whatever it is. Give me something that is equal to the best work of your life. Make it look like it's the best work of your life. Because that's what I'm asking, because this is what we need to do for these people. I mean, my contract, as it were, has always been with the audience. As a creative artist, you can make a contract with your department chair. You can make a contract with your donors. You can make a contract with the critics. You can make a contract with any number of kinds of folks. You make a contract with your actors. We're going to do theater of cruelty, and we're really going to offend some people. Won't this be fun? Mm-hmm. Or you can make a contract with the audience. And so has always been my contract. And that comes partly from my experience as a magician, which was my father's craft. And I was a street magician for a while. It's a hunger penalty. If I don't connect, I don't eat. And that teaches you a lot. I've always, one of the things I've always wanted with the second space, in my theater, for example, is, I've got the one space, which is where the money comes from. But I forgot where I was going with this. I wanted to have this second space so that I could do what every artistic director dreams of, which is, I'm going to take this book. Alice in Wonderland's fine, why not? Or Peter Pan's one I've always wanted to do. I want to take the book, and I'd like to take these 8 actors. Heck, maybe I'll take this year's apprentice class upon graduation. I'm going to put them under contract, and we're going to go into the second space, and we're going to rehearse 4 hours, 5 times a week for 5 weeks. And then we're going to see what we've got. Yeah. Then we can decide to either write it down and keep going, or we'll pick a different book or whatever it is. But let's explore without that deadline that is going to, bring the hammer down. And let's get into that process aspect of it. And let's do a play without casting it at the front end. I've tried to get money out of Schubert. I've tried to get money out of Doris Duke. You try to get money out of these people. They only want to fund the new, the avant-garde, the next generation. And I'm saying, look, the vast majority of the people creating on Broadway and everywhere saw their first play as a high school student, and it was frickin' Shakespeare. You need to invest in these basics. You cannot have an avant-garde unless you have an established guard or something from which to creatively digress. But I've failed to make that case. I'll never get a MacArthur grant. Nobody will ever come and say, gee, Mr. Watkins, will $12 million help? I've been waiting my whole life, but that's not going to happen. But you got to be a professional, and you got to bring your game. And don't waste your audience's time. And if it's less than your best, you're wasting their time. Be famous for your diction. If you're not famous for your diction, why not? Why not? Why not?
How do you choose the people that you collaborate with?
So you take a senior actor who's done a dozen or 2 dozen productions or 20 or 30, and you put them in charge. They'll get it right a few times, but then eventually the notion of an auteur director
rears its head, where they will want to take an editorial point of view with the play. They'll try to make a point. They will think Shakespeare is saying this clearly when he may or may not be being intentionally obtuse.
Gotcha.
And then I talked to them and I find out that they hadn't paid attention at all what I was doing. You know, what I tend to do as a director is put people in a situation where they can succeed, and I get them to speak the text. And, you know, an actor can't think too much if they're actually speaking the text. If they're not speaking the text is when they start to think about things, about what this might mean, or this could mean that. And as a general rule, it's Shakespeare, it means what it says. He says what he means. I mean, he's pretty clear. I mean, just get up there and do that first. Serve the primary and secondary goal that is apparent there on the page, and then let the harmonics and the extra meaning occur in real time and in communion with the audience. There's nothing more gratifying than having a major revelation on stage when people are watching. In France, they have these machines where you can put money in and you get a hot baguette.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was a travesty when this happened. You know, the French were, oh my God, sacre bleu. You know, you're having money, you know, bread out of a machine. And what they would do is they would cook the bread to 90% and leave it in there. And then you put the money in, then it would pop into this little oven, and you had to wait 6.5 minutes while it cooked the last 10%. And then you got a hot baguette out of this machine. And you know, that was how they did it. So I never want a play to be directed so much to where they're, you know, I don't want to get past that 90% mark. I want everybody to be able to wield their text with fluency. I want them to know all the major stuff. I want to have agreed upon a running time and what we can and cannot do, where the money is, where the funny is. And then we get out there and we live that text and we wield it in real time. We do not present rehearsed conversation. That shit drives me crazy, especially I mean, you know, what's beautiful about Shakespeare when it's really working is it has the structure of Mozart, but it is played with the abandon that you get from jazz. And you get those two things together, and then you're popping that ball back and forth to your scene partner, and you're bouncing it out of the audience and back. It's just a gorgeous thing. But the actors, after working with me 10 or 20, 30 times, they didn't know how that was coming into being. So I'm always trying to identify your best ideas and let that be what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So that didn't work for me so well. So then as people started to go, then I would notice that I really liked what was happening when the people were directing the kid shows, where they were doing the Shakespeare teen ensembles in the summer. They were doing the residencies, because they would go with the best idea because they knew it was the best idea. And at the same time, they're just doing everything they could to get the kids to commit with their own emotion and all the things that I value. So then I started saying to people that you have to direct for Laura before I'll let you direct. Mm-hmm. And to an extent that worked for me for a little while. Now, you know, Andy was a great advocate. You ought to give Jacqueline something to direct. You ought to give her something to direct. And just the more I thought about Jacqueline, I just thought, you know, that woman is so smart. She's really clear. You know, she's intentional. I just love everything about her. And we were doing Hamlet, and I was playing Polonius to Clark Taylor's Claudius. He's my best friend. So we're sitting back there, and he hands me this copy of Equivocation. Mm-hmm. One of the more gratifying processes of my whole life. But anyway, gives it to me. He says, we should do this together. I'll play Cecil. You can play Shag. So I read a couple of the speeches. And of course, I'd heard about the play and I knew what it was about. And I'd heard the guy who wrote it speak. I knew other people who had done it. But, you know, just reading 2 or 3 speeches, I thought, well, we're just going to do this. And then I called and I offered that directing job to Jacqueline. And she was over the moon. Man, she just did such a fabulous job with that show that I believed in anything she wanted to do. I can't remember what the first one out of the box after that, but she just did a fabulous job.
And Equivocation that happened by instinct. I saw the production; it was wonderful.
Yes, I would have to say that I've done that 2 or 3 times where I have irresponsibly put something on the docket and then gotten into it and learned the reasons why I shouldn't do that.
What else is on the list? What do you want to do? What's outside of the architecture, the theater? As it grows, what kind of shows do you want to do or see?
Oh, I want to do restoration comedies, which is why I hired John Ammerman to do The Country Wife. You know, I want to do the Jacobeans. I'd like to do the Medea. I'd like to do some Greek tragedies. I noticed you did Philoctetes. Philoctetes was in my repertory acting class, and I played the clubfoot guy. Atrius! House of Atrius. Man, I love that stuff. And, I can't make that sell. I'd love to do it and do it upright. I think over time I could develop an audience that would crave these kinds of things. But, I have this thing I would like to do, which is, I call it a fortnight celebration, where we do 12 plays in 14 days.
Oh, wow.
And, this was actually grew out of looking at a 5-year plan. And it looked as though we were about to nail it with Emory, and I was going to get that theater. And so I was going to have this amazing Elizabethan playhouse that had excellent food service and great acoustics and could seat 400 people. And it was going to be polygonal, much closer to what it needed to be. And I was going to have that, and it was going to be a 2.5 to a 3-year arc to get it open. And so I was asking myself, well, what do you want to open with? Because for the longest time I thought to myself, we just take what we do in the smaller reality, put it in the same personnel footprint in the larger reality, and then grow the salaries and the personnel footprint as slow as possible. And you would create a surplus of cash, and then you could grow into that theater. And that would be a way to do it. But the other way to do it would be to time the opening of that new facility. It take 3.5 years, very intentionally, to build the understructure of a company so that you had a group of 23 folks that could, begin that final run up to the opening of that new theater already having 8 plays in their bodies. And then you add the final 4 as you run up to that. And then you do a fortnight celebration for 2 weeks, where you do a different play a night on 12 of those 14 nights. And then 13th of the nights, one of them you have, you do Shakespeare music or whatever it is, do a concert. And on one of the nights, you just have a party. So it's going to sell really, really well. So, but, the thing that was really getting me excited was, think about it. I mean, if you did that project, then what you would wind up with at the end of that is you would have this Elizabethan theater. Actually, you'd have 2, because you'd have that one and you'd have the one next door. And you would have a single company that could do any one of 12 plays day after tomorrow.
Wow.
If you can imagine the flexibility in the marketplace of what you could do with that. But what I'm saying is you will have created an Elizabethan Shakespeare Company, the likes of which we have not seen since Shakespeare breathed upon this earth, which is a playhouse and a group of people that can do any one of these plays on a moment's notice. And I would say build on that, because it's conceivable that from that beginning, over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, you could get 2/3 or maybe even the entire frickin' canon in repertory with a group of 30 actors. Whereas what we could do is we could look at what Shakespeare gave us, and we could replicate that as nothing, just an educational experience. What would that be like? What do we learn about how these works were created and how they work and how they function in the world just by doing that experience? And I'm saying, let's do that. Let's push the envelope, because the greatest tragedy of our whole industry being marginalized to the degree that it is that the huge excess capacity that exists in the acting pool. Because somehow our management and directing structures don't have the imagination to see that these actors are capable of so much more than we're asking them.
Yeah, you're speaking of different rooms. You're speaking about maybe rules and protocols of governance that came to protect people in a certain house that might be applicable for that house, but when it comes to this theater, it doesn't make any sense. For a rep,
it is true.
This company is not going to have a rep group of actors doing it because they don't exist in America. They just, maybe there's a handful of them.
Nah, they almost don't exist. I mean, American Shakespeare Center comes really close. They have 2 or 3 companies, but they're all doing 3 or 4 plays. The Actors Shakespeare Project in Boston has a good company structure, but they're not coming together in any degree of regularity to do that. There's not a lot of us. There are some academics that are really excited about original practice, but to try to make this a professional endeavor, I don't know of any company that is doing what we're doing.
What are the things that you need moving forward? Is there anything that you are, maybe someone watching will go, hey, I can help out?
You know, if I had 3 or 4 people who could hear what I had to say about a fortnight celebration, understand the business case for what it is that we need, and could come together and simply not take no for an answer. I mean, you know, people have been telling me to be patient with Emory University and to bide my time and just wait, Jeff. They've been telling me that for 12 freaking years. You know, well, I've been in my job for 35 years. You know, maybe I've got 12 more years. It's possible. But, you know, I don't have a joyful 12 years if it is continuing to work with the things that I do not have. And it isn't that I need, you know, the building next door. I need the money. Those are the things that I need. The building doesn't have to be next door. You can move the whole Shakespeare Tavern a block back and one to the left. I got lots of places we could move if I had people who believed in the vision to such a degree that they would help me really, you know, go all in to make it happen. When we talk about the Atlanta way, you know, Mayor Andrew Young, you know, he says that, you know, you can do anything in Atlanta if you just get the right people on the team. And, you know, I have several of the right people on the team. You know, I got one guy on my board who is so in love with what we do. And if he wasn't so in love with what we do, then maybe he would be really excited about what more I have to offer. I mean, my whole, you know, whatever level of success that I have, people have always been saying, well, this is great. Why do you want to change it? Well, this is great. Well, but, you know, because it isn't sustainable, because it can't happen without me, because these people have crap ass jobs and they deserve better. And it's just like, I need an advocate. I need a business advocate who does not have an artistic agenda, who sees what we have, who can speak to the veracity and the proven track record of what we have, can speak funder and go at it. I had that, but tragically I lost her. And now I'm where I am now. So yeah, that's what I need. There's plenty of ways to just give us money and support us. You know, come back when we open. You know, come see David Weber play Sir Toby Belch. This play was definitely on track to be brought back next November. The support us link there. There's, you know, you can give a one-time gift. PayPal Giving Fund is a way you can funnel money to us where we get 101% of the gift. So if somebody's giving more than $100 or so, I say give it to the PayPal Giving Fund. Just type in Atlanta Shakespeare Company. We're a registered charity there. They take the money, keep it a month, and give us $101, or $10,000 and $100. You know, 101%.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You're 30 years behind me, so just keep at it. Train the young ones. Make your contract with the audience. Don't let people flatter you into thinking you're brilliant when you know you're not. Don't let them trick you into thinking you suck when you know you don't. You know, what you see with your eye is the truth. And if you can be true to your own star, I think that's your best guide.
Love you. Love you.
I love you too. Bye.
And now his mother's crying again. Oh, I wonder if the
Be famous for your diction. If you're not famous for your diction, why not?